It's time once again for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. Hello everybody, it's Uncle Matt, and I'm here to read you another bedtime story. And tonight's bedtime story is kind of a downer. It talks about war, and right now there's a war going on. A war that is affecting a lot of people around the whole world, not just for the two countries involved, three actually. So we're going to read a story about war, and we can only pray for peace and for the end of war. That's happening right now with Russia and Ukraine and Belarus. So let's get into this story called The War. It was a French book and it got translated to English. The author is Anais Vaugelade. And it was copyright. Yes. Copyright originally in 1998, and the first kind of English translation was 2001. Are you ready? Here we go. The war. The Reds and the Blues were at war. Each morning the soldiers walked the battlefield. Each evening the survivors brought home the wounded and the dead. The war had lasted for so long that no one could remember why it had begun. Victor II, king of the Reds, counted his soldiers and counted them again. 10 plus 20 is 30. Add another 50 and that makes 80. Only 80 soldiers. That's not enough soldiers to win the war, and he began to cry. But happily for him, Victor II, king of the Reds, had a son named Julius. When he saw his father begin to lose hope, Julius called, "Have courage, Papa," and the king felt his courage rise. Now over here, Armand XII, who ruled the Blues, also had 80 soldiers and a son. But when Armand XII worried, his son had nothing to say. Armand XII's son was named Fabian, and he wasn't very interested in war. Actually, Fabian wasn't interested in much of anything. He spent his days in the park sitting in a tree. One day, Prince Fabian received a letter from Prince Julius. It read, "Our fathers are nearly out of soldiers. If you are brave enough, prepare your horse and armor and meet me on the battlefield tomorrow morning. We will duel, and the winner of the duel will win the war for his kingdom. Sincerely, Julius." Fabian sighed. He didn't like horses very much. The princesses met on the battlefield early the next morning. Julius rode in a war horse. Fabian sat on the back of a sheep. "On guard," cried Julius to start the duel. "Bah," bleated the sheep. Julius's frightened horse reared straight up. Julius fell to the ground. "Are you hurt?" asked Fabian. But Julius was more than hurt. The fall had killed him. The Red soldiers screamed, "You cheated! The duel was a trick." Fabian wanted to explain that it was an accident, but the soldiers had lances and spears, so he decided to run away. Armand XII, king of the Blues, was waiting for his son. "You should be ashamed," he scolded Fabian. But I did nothing, Fabian protested. Precisely, at least Prince Julius tried to win the war, growled his father. Shame and double shame, I banish you from my kingdom. Prince Fabian hid in the park. As morning turned to afternoon, the soldiers returned to the battlefield, and Fabian had an idea. He wrote 2 letters, one for Armand the 12th, King of the Blues, and the other for Victor II, King of the Reds. The 2 letters said exactly the same thing. I am with Basil IV, King of the Yellows. He has given me a huge army. If you are brave enough, prepare your horses and your armor. I will meet you on the battlefield tomorrow. Sincerely, Fabian. Armand the 12th read his letter that evening. My good-for-nothing son with an army, he roared. He'll have 8 soldiers at the most. I'll grind them into sausage. When Victor II read his letter, he shrugged his shoulders. He would crush Prince Fabian for having cheated in the duel with Prince Julius. He put the letter in his pocket and went to bed. Each army approached the battlefield the next morning. When he saw the blue army marching toward him, the King of the Reds splattered, "What are you doing here? Leave this battlefield." "We're here to face the yellow army," explained the King of the Blues. "I don't understand," complained the King of the Reds. The kings compared their letters and found they were identical. "How many soldiers do you suppose he'll have?" wondered Armand the 12th. "Perhaps 8 or 80 or 800, guessed Victor II. "The number doesn't matter. We Blues are extremely brave," said Armand the 12th. Victor II replied, "We Reds, of course, are fearless." At lunchtime, the Blues and the Reds were still waiting for the Yellows. Waiting can make anyone nervous, even the brave and the fearless. "Sir," said Armand the 12th, "since we face 800 men, perhaps we should become allies." "I think we should," agreed Victor II. The allies waited all afternoon. At dinner time, they sent out for sandwiches. They decided to spend all night on the battlefield in case the Yellow Army tried to sneak up on them. On the second day, the Yellow Army still didn't arrive. The soldiers began to pitch tents and light campfires. On the third day, some of the soldiers' wives came to the battlefield. They brought pots and ladles, for soldiers can't live on sandwiches alone. On the 4th day, the women brought their babies, and on the 5th day, the other children felt lonely, so they followed their mothers. They brought their cows, pigs, and chickens. The older children began to trade back and forth. And on the 10th day, the battlefield looked like a village. Fabian thought, "The Reds thought I cheated, and the Blues thought I was useless. I don't have an army, and I never did, but I still ended the war." Fabian visited Basil IV, the King of the Yellows, to tell him the story. Basil laughed over Fabian's imaginary army, but he cried when he heard Prince Julius was dead, and he cried for the soldiers who had died in the war, even though he didn't know their names. Basil IV saw that Fabian was clever and brave. Because the King of the Yellows had no son of his own, he asked Fabian to become the Prince of the Yellows. Many years later, when Fabian was king, he ruled wisely and long, and of course, under King Fabian, no one fought a single war. The end. Something to think about. Yes, sometimes it's not all about fighting. Sometimes it's about using your brain and trying to solve ways in different ways than fighting. Well, that is all the time we have for Uncle Matt's bedtime story. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.